Hello and welcome to the Next Generation series, Composer Diversity. I'm Kate Landis, and I am going to be interviewing some composers who have a lot of different backgrounds and compose a lot of different kinds of music, have conversations about diversity in the world of composition. So today we are going to be talking with Geoff Schneider. Geoff is a composer, arranger, and educator. And he is a saxophone performance major. He specializes in jazz. So I really enjoyed talking with him and learning about what it was like to be a white male composing for a very diverse style of music. So please help me welcome Geoff Schneider. Tell me who you are, tell me about your musical journey, and how did you get to where you are today?
I am Geoff Schneider, and I've been playing the saxophone since fourth grade. I grew up, both my parents were divorced, but my stepdad was from Mexico, so there was a lot of musical diversity in the family already. We'd go out to restaurants, and there'd be live mariachi bands for me to hear, and on one end of things, and then my dad and I would listen to oldies or something else. So that was quite inspiring coming in. Seventh grade, to kind of go in the middle, I guess, I decided that I wanted to be a band director. I said to the band director, who was brand new at the time, I said, "Hi, I'd like to do what you do." And he's just like, "Are you crazy?" He gave me some scores to look at, and we worked on theory chops and conducting, and he introduced me to Leonard Bernstein, which was quite life-changing. A few years later, I finally started taking lessons to get ready for music school. I got exposed to jazz even more that way, like more serious jazz that way, because my teacher specialized in it. Because after a few years of being in music ed, I kind of decided, I like this playing thing. I want more time for it and less of the book stuff right now, so I can write and play. But then I met jazz pianist Steve Rudolph. He said, "Well, why, haven't you written anything of your own yet?" And so he gave me a few really great strategies, and it changed a lot of how I thought of things. Went into a whole career of just me writing things and having some successes and lots more failures, but it's been pretty successful.
So, I mean, you talked about this a little bit, but why music and what does music mean to you? And why jazz on top of that?
Couldn't ever get enough of learning, and I still don't. It's education is infinite, and especially with music, it's accessible to everybody. There's no one person that doesn't understand music. You can have a music degree or not, it doesn't matter. If you can feel something to it, you understand it, and it means something to you, and it can bring you, as Dennis Glocky would say, a significant musical experience. In regards to jazz, reason why I even got into wanting to play any of that was my dad had gotten the great idea somehow to show me Blazing Saddles by Mel Brooks when I was in fourth grade. And the Basie Big Band had been playing this non-diegetic music the whole time, and then suddenly they become diegetic and they appear in the middle of the desert playing April in Paris. And Basie is literally there at the piano. And I just remember hearing that sound for the first time. But when I got to college, I was, the jazz director, Marco, had asked me, "Well, why aren't you doing a combo?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm not ready." He's just like, "You're ready. Just come on in." And I didn't until a few semesters later.
I was forced by Marco. That's how I got in. So
Yeah.
he said, "You're doing it." I said, "Oh,
Yeah.
am I?" And then here I am. Why is diversity important in music education and music in general? And I think you, with jazz and the jazz side of things, that's kind of a very interesting twist on it. So,
Well, I mean, music, like any art, is a reaction to the life around us and the emotions and the politic and just everything. And we've seen a lot of that, especially in this past year with the pandemic. I mean, the amount of music and outpouring that has been written to reflect this, like, I think this is one of the first times that we really get to see that firsthand on such a scale. The word art doesn't need to be placed on a giant pedestal, like, oh, it's something from the heavens and, it's unattainable and you'll never reach it and you can never understand its grandeur and all that stuff. Kind of going back to what I was saying before about why music, it's infinite. You can take that one word, music, and go in any possible direction.
Mm-hmm.
But sadly, a lot of music education only focuses on one area of it.
Dead white guys, we like to call it.
Exactly. All dead white guys. I mean, jazz is wonderful because it's Black improvisational music. That's exactly what it is.
Street music. It's music that was created for the people, by the people, and yeah.
It's so harmonically beautiful. It's an extension of everything that was around it at the time. Because the amount of stuff that jazz influenced that everybody listens to today, whether it be blues, funk, Latin music, anything. The teachers will go in and expect them to kind of sit and listen to all these dead white guys and whatever else they want them to, but they're not paying attention to what the kids are listening to, whatever the school board wants or whatever.
Or whatever J.W. Pepper wants you to buy. Because if you go on, what are the first things that are on there? You have...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the gate-kept favorites. Oh, well, your band is
standard.
Your band is not going to be good enough unless it does,
Holst.
Holst every single semester.
Yeah, that actually leads really well into it. So my next question is, why is it important for young musicians to see an array of composers performed?
Well, one is the inspiration factor and motivation factor for students. And when you're being taught constantly about these dead white guys, it's like, okay, it's easy for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look around and it's like, okay, there's not many women in this department. Holy crap, this department's whitewashed to all hell.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think like taking it from like a female perspective, I mean, I still have white privilege, but like even I think at my time at Penn State, I don't know if there was another female in any of the jazz bands I played with. I may have been the only one. If there was, there may have been one more. I also I am the only, and I've talked about this with my professor, I am the only high school marching band / concert band director, female under the age of 25 that I know of. Mm-hmm. Like, there's not many. So it's such a strange concept, and you would think that we'd be farther, especially as musicians, musicians are more normally liberal and open people, and you'd think that we'd be farther, but we're not, which is interesting.
And it's really kind of sad because I was thinking about this morning before our conversation that honestly we see even more women in classical music than we do in jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Like more female instrumentalists. And wait, so you're the vocalist. Wait, you're the drummer. Classical seems to have more of the issue on the race side of things, and it still has a lot of gender issues. But jazz has a lot of the gender issues.
Oh yeah.
But it's built off of race and all the sacrifice that went with it. So it's like
jazz is interesting too because jazz was at the forefront of the race issues. So like in the 20s, 30s, 40s, you had Louis Armstrong refusing to play at places that he couldn't eat at. You had which I think drove the race part of everything forward, which did not happen for classical music. So it's never really progressed to that. But there was never that push for the females in jazz, and there still hasn't been.
And I mean, it's been great to see. Especially in the past few years, different collectives coming up. Like you got the Artemis group, which is just an all-star group of females. And you got all the stuff that Sherry Miracle does. I just saw her last week, actually, with her trio. And, she's got the three divas. She's got 5 plays. She's got the Diva Jazz Orchestra. You have all the stuff that, Roxy Koss is doing with Women in Jazz Orchestra or Women in Jazz Organization, or Key of She. And there's all these wonderful little collectives coming up, but there just simply isn't enough. Like, it can't just be performative. Mm-hmm. You have to advocate for one another. You have to do collaborations. You have to, offer your colleagues as suggestions. You have to get out of your own ego to do it.
That's interesting, putting like jazz next to classical that way and kind of comparing like race versus gender. I've never thought of it that way, which is interesting. So if you could tell educators in the US to change or add one thing to their music education curricula having to do with diversity, what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, you've got the mainstay things that are already being talked about, which is diversify your composers and arrangers more. You have to be open to what's out there. Those are already being talked about, and they need to be talked about more for them to take hold and actually become part of the circuit. But I think the biggest thing that we can do as educators, you have to advocate for all these other genres and the diverse world of music earlier. There are so many music educators that go through college, and the college kind of, as I've said before, they gatekeep it. Oh, you can only do these things
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to be successful. You are only going to play classical music. Educators have to understand that each facet of music is a bridge to another one. And then when you look at scores by composers who, like, okay, maybe you're teaching Gershwin or something like that, or whatever else, you now have that experience of all those other music things that those composers were exploring,
Mm-hmm.
to say, oh, that's what they meant,
Right.
and have it not sound cheesy and fake. And there just has to be an advocacy for that. And it's amazing how many educators think, okay, I can get by just knowing what I know,
Mm-hmm.
because then you're only teaching within your own limitations that you're setting for them.
And you could have a future jazz legend in your class who was never being introduced to that music.
Yeah.
Or you could have some black students in your class who aren't seeing their like the genre that was written by their people, things like that.
There's an absence of representation. And you know what? A lot of educators don't want to talk about jazz because there's a lot of white educators out there, and they don't want to talk about where it comes from, honestly.
Right. And I mean that's an issue. I think even um, like in jazz improv at Penn State, um,
Mm-hmm.
there's 4 people in that class,
Mm-hmm.
but it's talking about the history of jazz in how jazz originated, and jazz is the American music. Why
And
was
it's
there
not
only
required.
4 educators in that
And
class?
it's not required.
Right, and it's not required.
But yes, that's the one thing that music educators need to understand. They need to understand jazz and the history of and why and how to teach it, and they need to have been in it.
Don't I think that improv? I mean, if you're a celloist,
You can
an improv class is going to make your mind so much bigger. Just taking like, what has been a challenge that you have faced composing for a diverse genre of music?
I think the two biggest things that would come to mind are my own privilege and my own understanding. I'm writing Black American music
Mm-hmm.
and trying to understand it and where it comes from. And there's so much in there to understand. If you're going to write for something seriously, you better well know where it comes from and why it is how it is. It's disrespectful to the music and to the people who helped make it to just write it.
Actually, you're doing a great job segueing into the next question.
Okay.
What can white male composers do to help more diverse or female composers get programmed and get noticed?
Gotta advocate, collaborate, advocate, fund, organize. Um, if someone wants to program your work, you ask them right back. Oh, after you say, okay, yes, you can program my work. How hard is it to say or ask who else is on the program? Because you got to get over your ego enough to say, oh, well, maybe someone else is a better fit for it.
We had a good discussion. Like if you have a megaphone, you need to have the responsibility to use your megaphone. And I think that megaphone can be privilege. If you have that megaphone, you need to be the one using it, because nothing's going to change if those people are not. They need to be the ones who are stepping forward and changing it, which is interesting.
In the vast stream of social media that we have, how hard is it to share a sample of a piece of music that you heard on Spotify for the composers that need more representation? You don't need to talk about it overtly. You can. You just need to get it out there, because then people are going to hear it and they're going to be like, wow, what's that? Because it's just a new sound to them. But you're still getting their music out there. It's still helpful in some way, and there just needs to be more of it. and you got to do your homework as well. If you're going to teach as a white teacher or anything else, you need to understand who else is out there.
Mhm.
Because if not, you're doing a
For the
disservice.
kids in front of you, composed, or I mean, program for the kids in front of you.
Yeah, those kids, you treat them like you do the composers, because they could be.
Mhm.
They could be the next composers that are being taught, and
Um,
every single face in there deserves someone to look up to.
What have been some of the most exciting changes in music that you've seen with regard to diversity, and what do you look forward to seeing in the future?
I would just say these past 2 years have been a huge jump. Like, even for my own learning, I've been learning so much about all these different composers that I had never heard of before because of the prominence of Black Lives Matter movement this year, like these past few years,
Mhm.
and the changes that we're moving towards, hopefully moving towards. It's just been great to learn about all of these new composers that should have been talked about, not only for people of color, but also for LGBTQ communities all over the place. Female
Mhm.
composers and all the underrepresented groups are, coming up fast now, and I want to see more of it.
Yeah.
I want to see more of it in schools. I want to see more of it in my own listening and reading, because it's a whole nother pool of inspiration to pull from,
Right.
because you get their experiences as composers and arrangers and performers that you don't get with other things. We all make our own music.
Mhm.
It's how we understand one another, as if we're talking on a musician level or a human or just a layman perspective. It's
Mhm.
how we all relate to each other. As a composer, the more I can understand that, the better I hope my music can be for people.
Mhm. I think the past year, or the past 2 years now, at least, I guess at this point, it made America stop.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone stopped, and it made everyone look towards the arts,
Mm-hmm.
which is amazing, but it's also sad how that's what it took.
Yeah.
And with Black Lives Matter and all that, I think that came at a great time for that, just because that kind of meshed with arts, and so many new things and ideas and discussions happened. Um,
Right.
but it's sad that it took us this long, and it's sad that that's what it took for it to happen. But I am very glad that it is happening.
And I mean, even a weird one is TikTok. You know, you know how many like really great musicians are on there?
Yeah.
Like there's some ones that are like, okay, I know how to play a few chords on guitar, but they're still making music. Because it's not gate kept. You
Mm-hmm.
just make it for people. The pandemic gave everybody the time to do that.
Right.
And there's so much now. And there's people building their careers off of that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Yeah.
I hope to see more of it.